year.
What a blessing to have another year.
We've made it. We made it.
You know, I feel a bit weird asking how you are because it seems everything around us is on fire, but I do want to check in. How are you? Amina, let's start with you. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm feeling blessed. I've managed to avoid, Amarion and all the weird variants of COVID. Most of my friends and family that have been affected are recovering. So I'm just trying to push forward, and I'm in good spirits. Thank you for asking.
Of course, Ricardo, how about you?
Is it called Omarion? I'm getting confused. Is what's going on? Is it Omarion?
That's what the streets are calling it.
I love it. I love it. How am I? I usually respond to that question by saying I feel sensational, and uh, it's usually perceived as though I'm feeling great, but it's just to say that I am feeling everything, you know. So yeah, I'm gonna stick with that. I'm feeling sensational, the good, the bad, all of it. I'm feeling it right now. So yeah.
I
Thank you.
appreciate it. It feels like
Thank
a
you for
reminder
asking.
to be present. Thank you for that, Ricardo.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Okay, you guys. Well, I'm okay, I guess.
Yes. How you feeling, Jessica? Where are you at?
I'm drinking wine
Okay.
out of this
I love it.
teacup.
Nice, nice. I have a sort of what is this? Cayenne, maple syrup, lemon. It's kind of like a master cleanse drink from Whole Foods.
Oh,
So yeah, that's what I'm sipping on.
very nice.
Ooh.
What
My son may come in here.
I was gonna say, is that Shep?
That's-
Hey, Shepherd. Okay, well, let's get started.
yes.
We are under siege, you guys. It is safe to say that our lives are at risk, and either we know this or we have to face extinction. I think Black space equals Black power, and the Black box test is an exhibition. It's currently on view at the August Wilson Center, and it invites only Black people who identify as Black, African American, African Caribbean, Afro-Latinx, or of the African diaspora to enter, engage, and explore the space. Today in this space, I'm so very grateful to be joined by Amina Cooper, hopefully Mavis Gregg, and Ricardo Iumuri Robinson. And Ricardo, I want to make sure I say your name correctly. Iumuri, is that correct?
Perfect.
Excellent.
Yes, yes.
Of course, we are expansive, and our names are generally followed by many titles and accolades. So I'm going to share a little bit about each of you and put your bios in the chat, but then I'd like to give you an opportunity to, from your own words, explain a little bit about who you are and how you come into this space. And so I'll start with Amina, who wears many hats as an administrator, a curator, a writer, consultant, a strategist. The list goes on and on. Amina, you do the necessary work. Oh, it's Mavis. I need a link. Mavis, I'm gonna pause. Sorry, Amina. You should have gotten an email from Zoom that came at around, let's see, probably 10:58 this morning. Let me know if you didn't get that. And Dylan, maybe you can spend a moment helping me troubleshoot this with Mavis so I can continue our program if you don't mind. Okay, cool. Amina. Let's see, you do the necessary labor. Also, I think it's worth mentioning of archiving our work and telling our stories as the leader behind Black Monuments on Instagram. You currently manage over $3 million in large-scale projects centering public art. And you've previously served on the Americans of the Arts Public Art Network Advisory Council. Amina, thank you for being here today. Tell us a little bit about who you
That
are.
was so lovely. Nobody's ever introduced me like that with those dulcet tones. I appreciate that. Yes. Okay. So I am a public art project manager, working independently. So I do consulting, helping artists, and acting as a liaison between an artist and a client mount these projects. And that's really what I've been doing for the last, I would say, since 2016. But my background is in fine arts. I studied photography at Howard University, then moved into artist management because I realized I did not want to be a commercial photographer, and my fine art practice would not sustain me. And I realized my joy was really just helping other people find the arts and helping artists realize their art projects. So that's what I've been doing, and I really love it. Other than that, I'm a tourist. I'm from Atlanta. I love Nas. I love hip hop. I love graffiti. And I think that's really kind of how I started into public arts, just being obsessed with graffiti as a middle schooler.
I listened to a podcast that you did recently where it ended and the host asked you to describe like what song you would like to go out as, and you were describing Nas.
Yep.
The World Is Ours. And then
Yes.
It was so cool at the end. Obviously this was planned, but he played the song as it was fading out at the end of the interview. It was great.
Very nice. And I don't like doing podcasts, but if I'm going to do one, we got to do it like that.
It was awesome.
Thank you.
Of course. Okay, now we're going to move on to Ricardo, who's here. Ricardo,
Yes.
a conceptual sound artist whose work attends to patterns and forms in sound and space. Much of your work listens to the interrelationships between sound and shape, language and space, what you've previously called the quote ancestry of sound. Ricardo, I really enjoyed your recent The Adventures of Lavender Freddy and the Sunscreen's Conspiracy. Yes. A year-long Instagram project that just concluded on the 31st of December. Your posts curate a specific pieces of found media inspired by and response to American soul singer, songwriter, and producer Marvin Gaye. His 11th studio album, What's Going On. This archival exhibition, it's become a movement. I think that people have tagged me in things like, have you seen this? I have shared things with other people like, have you seen this? This pertains to your research. So I've very much enjoyed that project. And it's addressed things from climate change to racial discrimination to even environmental injustices. So I'm really happy to welcome you here today, Ricardo. Thank you.
That. Thank you so much for the invitation. It feels good to be here as well. I guess I say a little something about myself. Or...
Yes, please.
Okay. I am Ricardo Iamuri Robinson, conceptual sound artist. And when it comes to, I guess that's kind of like a title that allows for me to make shit up. You know, it just gives me some room to breathe. And what I mean by that is even the artwork that you're speaking about, referring to as far as the sunscreen conspiracy. I would say the essence of that artwork is listening. I would say my art is about listening, and whatever concepts I can develop in order to create a space of deep listening, or for one to like pause and reconsider ideas, reconsider history, reconsider narratives, reconsider, you know, how today has been shaped. I'm all about using my art as a medium to, or a vehicle to get to that space of listening. So that's where the concepts come in. and then the sound art is actually what engages you as a participator. So and yeah, I call it many things. Sound archaeology, like a form of sound archaeology. I call it the ancestry of sound, but it really, to me, comes down to the listener is always the composer. No matter how I manipulate a soundscape, no matter what intentions I put into it, we are all bringing ourselves to that moment of listening, the way we have defined our terms and how we're feeling in that day. So yeah, that's how I'm using sound right now to really encourage people to listen on their own terms and respect that, honor that you are part of the composition with how you translate sound, you know, things like that.
Thank you, Ricardo.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
was
yeah.
lovely.
Yeah.
Oh, I read something else or listened to something where you talked about your first relationship with nature, or like your first memory of nature is your mom telling you to go outside.
Get
Like
outside.
to go outside equated nature to you.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That felt familiar.
For sure. Like we're at a time in the Black intellectual movements where you're exploring the Black outdoors, and I'm like, well, the Black outdoors has always been, boy, get your ass outside. That's what it has always been. And now, I could add a little vocabulary to that actuality, but it's just been get outside, go outside and explore. So
And it's often followed with you smell like outside after you come
no,
inside. Clearly we all have Black mothers. Like this is
for sure.
well, thank you for that, Ricardo. I appreciate it.
Indeed.
And we're also joined with Mavis Grad. How you doing?
I'm good. Good to see you.
I'm
and
so
it is
excited to
Mavis
see
Long
you.
A. Mhm.
It's been a second.
Yeah, I want to say like at least 3 years.
No, it hasn't. We did the Nina Simone thing more recent than that.
Oh, that's right.
It has been a second.
In pandemic times, time is just great.
Welcome. It's
Long.
great to see you.
It's great to see you and great to meet you all.
So we're just doing intros. And I'm just going to say a little bit about how much I love you and the work that you do. And then I'm going to let you take it away to describe from your own words what it is that you do.
Awesome.
Let's see, an advocate, attorney, entrepreneur, collector who has a deep devotion to our shared environment and the land. You do the work of protecting Black property by helping Black families maintain and keep their privately owned forest land. You also have experience as the director of the Sustainable Forestry and African American Land Retention Project at the African Forest, it would be dope if it was the African Forest,
right?
but it's the American Forest Foundation.
We should start that actually.
Okay, maybe this is okay. You're on the board of directors for Triangle Land Conservancy. You're a member of the North Carolina Parks and Recreation Authority. I think you even coined this phrase, death and dirt law, in reference to, is it estate planning and air property? So really, it's so obvious that you have this deep connection to the land and the environment, Mavis, and we're so happy to have you here. I'll let you tell a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I never considered that my two passions, art and intergenerational wealth centered around real estate, would converge. So thank you. But yeah, my professional background is as an attorney, and most of my work has centered around helping Black people maintain and grow wealth, particularly when their wealth is centered around real estate. That led me to the trees. So when I started my law practice in 2015, I believe, my focus was helping, providing a needed service to families who center wealth around real estate. And I had no idea. I mean, I never would have imagined that that would lead me to become an environmentalist and a conservationist and work with a forestry organization. But part of our connection with land is stewardship, and part of our ability to maintain intergenerational wealth is to leverage those assets to grow the wealth. And so forestry, most people don't know this, but forestry, I mean, everything you probably have in your home has some connection to trees. And then our ability to have clean water and things like that is connected to trees. So forestry is where it's at. And so that's what brought me to the environmental space. But certainly we know that our community is overburdened by waste and environmental injustice. And so there's a connection there. And it was interesting to think about with, you know, when you invited me to participate in this, interesting to think about the intersection of this and art. And I was reminded of a project that an environmentalist and attorney, Danielle Purifoy, and then visual artist Turquoise Dyson did, where they were working with Black settlements. So post-Civil War Black towns that were created for us, by us, and capturing some of the oral histories and the archives, and just telling a story through art. And so I'm really looking forward to hearing and learning from Amina and Ricardo about your work and how that intersects with environmental justice and injustice and conservation and land.
What a perfect segue that was. So thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. Normally, we would be inside the container at the August Wilson Center. We would be at the black box test, but due to Omarion, Amina, as you pointed out earlier, and just, you know, keeping ourselves and our community safe, we're in the comfort of our own homes. I'm downstairs in my basement. The black box test, however, is open at the August Wilson Center up until the end of this month. And so I encourage you to use safety precautions, but to visit the exhibition if you have a chance. It's an interactive installation, consists of thematic illustrations, concept maps, a sound piece by DJ and artist Marwo, selections from private libraries of artists Sonia Louise Davis, Becca Zela Mguni, and Camille Posley, as well as a robust program with Black experts across the field who are dedicated to protecting and creating Black space, like each of you. Black box systems are not only an observation, but they're an experiment. Here in this Black space, we're creating a container for our dreams, our schemes, discourse, scholarship. We are the architects. We make our own rules collectively. This test is not tied to labor or productivity. We do not dream of labor. Instead, I'd like to focus all of our energy towards ease, towards play, care, friendship, vision casting, and abundance. This is not a work or a space about assimilation. We're not upholding systemic oppressions or recreating traditional models of exploitation that are continuously proven ineffective, hinder our progress, and limit our expansiveness. This shit is ours and it's Black. And we define what that means today. So it's in all of your hands. In this experiment today, though, as a part of our test, I'd like to try something new that I've not talked to any of you about. So it is truly an experiment, and I hope to get your consent. In this Black Zoom sphere, I'll act as a moderator, sure, in that I'll propose an initial prompt and I'll look at the time. But aside from that, I'm really interested in creating a space for us that ignites generative conversations. Without the hierarchy of a moderator in relation to a speaker. I'd really like for y'all to flow by finding ways maybe to end each of your responses with a question to another one of y'all. Does this sound okay? Are you game? It's like when you're on the airplane. Can I get a verbal yes from each person in the exit row?
I'm down.
Try our best.
Okay. Okay, remember, we're in the jacuzzi, we're drinking champagne. This is
Right,
like
right.
Friday. Mavis, is that okay with you too?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. So each of you have a practice that seems to involve a specific connection, a responsibility, or a relationship with land and shared environment. I'm really interested in your collective and individual expertise surrounding nature, this indigenous land, and our shared public space, how it intersects with race and identity, and ultimately how it shows up in your own work or art. So things worth noting, our relationship with land as Black people is inherently complex. From being bought, sold, owned, and considered chattel, or considered someone else's property and being valued only second to land, right? To the legal mechanisms that have been put in place to specifically prevent Black people from owning land and real property, like redlining, racially restrictive covenants, housing discrimination policies, urban renewal projects, et cetera. The list goes on, right? To the alarming amount of environmental injustices that disproportionately affect Black people and Black communities, high levels of exposure, concentration of toxic facilities, poor nutrition, nutritional deficiencies, unequal projection, and quality of life that's generally provided through laws and regulations. So my question, and Ricardo, I'd like to begin with you, so I'll just set you up. How and who is responsible for tending to the communities and the land directly impacted by systemic environmental and structural racism? Like, is this the arts? Is this Black people? You know, we say all the time that the arts can be a vehicle for social change, but is this really the Black artist's responsibility to repair? Specifically knowing the complexity of our history with this land, the embedded oppressive structures, and the many environmental injustices done to us, as placing the pressure on us to help, hinder, or hurt, you know. Is the goal to get more conservation organizations to talk about their role in racial inequity and land loss? Is it more public art projects that highlight the negative impacts of our use? It makes me think of this Audre Lorde quote, "Whenever the need for some pretense of communication arises, those who profit from our oppression call upon us to share our knowledge with them." In other words, it's the responsibility of the oppressed to teach the oppressors their mistakes. There's a constant drain of energy, which might be better used in redefining ourselves and devising realistic scenarios for altering the present and constructing the future. Ricardo, I invite your thoughts.
Well, damn. Oh, where does one begin? With everything that you shared, the first thought that came to mind was there are people in this world that believe they can own the land. And there are people in this world that have an understanding that the land owns them. And we are part of an economic system that exploits the land through extraction. And that land has also been very tied to people. So in that exploitation, families are uprooted and disturbed and violated. So when I think about like this sort of stewardship or this sort of who tends to the land, the hold on one second, the relationship, our relationship with land has to, I believe it has to, we have to go through some sort of really spiritual or psychological shift of feeling connected again, feeling reconnected to land. Um, like gentrification, it's like that's violence. That's violence. And it in that act of dispossessing a people, you are dispossessing so many stories that existed in that space, you know. So many yeah, just a certain local culture that was created by that neighborhood, in the way that we have dealt with it with such, I don't know, lackadaisicalness, or it's, I don't think we have addressed how violent that is, to uproot a people, eh, you know, just for the beautification or the betterment, the economic betterment of that particular space in a city. And I think what has to happen is that we have to reconnect with space, to the point where it isn't even in our language. We're no longer going out in nature. We are nature. Nature is us. There's no separation. Um, so those are like my first thoughts, you know, when I heard everything that you were saying. It's just, what is my relationship with the land? Trying to remove the separation, also understanding that this sort of property ownership thing, it isn't my bag, but I'm in a system that encourages that. So therefore I have to play a certain game. But, you know, ultimately that's not my thing. That's not my relationship with land. I hate this game that I have to play with when it comes to land. But I'll stop right there and just open it up for other people to add on. Yeah, that's
I'm muted first. I was waiting on you, Amina. I think you posed the question, you know, whether artists have the responsibility, Black artists have the responsibility. And I don't know about a responsibility. I think artists should be able to create how they are moved to create. But I do think there's an opportunity as it relates to artists, particularly with Black artists, in many opportunities, actually. I think, you know, in telling the story of our history, our relationship with land, in imagining the future or even the present, you know, and looking at it. Like, one of the things that I've realized in my legal career as it relates to real estate is that not a lot has changed in terms of the power dynamics, in terms of how we view it, you know, as you mentioned, Ricardo, from a capitalist perspective. But artists can see things very differently than those of us who aren't artists. And so I think there's a lot of opportunities in painting a different, not literally, but in envisioning a different norm, as it relates to land, a different relationship, and even looking back at the past, what were some of the past traditions? Artists are able to infuse that in their work and just get us to think more critically as a people. So yeah, I would offer that as a first brush, but I don't know about responsibility. I feel like Black artists should be able to do whatever they want to do.
Jess, first of all, you're such a genius. Like, the way that you put that question together, it sent me down like a rabbit hole of like just memories and feelings. And I was like, oh, okay, this is what we're doing today. But I really appreciate that. And it made me think of several things. In terms of, is it our responsibility? You know how when you're the descendant of people who were enslaved, and, you know, generations before you were, you know, liberated, and you can move off of the land that you were, you know, your ancestors, you know, slaved. But often, you know, we still have ties to the land. We feel like we can't leave. That's sort of how I feel about this work. You know, I've done a lot of policy research for, you know, white-led institutions around cultural equity. And I do feel like a problem solver, and that this is not my problem to solve, but I also feel an obligation to try to create some sort of restoration, some justice for the artists who tried to break into this field and were unable to, that were blocked. You know, all of the other, you know, folks who dreamed about doing the work that we do, that, you know, they didn't have a path, they were blocked from a path, you know. And I had another conversation with some artists, and, you know, we were asking, like, how did you get your start? And she said, you know, before you have the skill set, you have to have the courage. And so I don't feel that it's my role, that it's, you know, my problem to fix, but I do want to work within the system so that other artists and other administrators have the courage. And I think by knowing that, you know, that this has been a very rigged and it's a system that has, you know, inherent biases and racism woven all up in it, you know, that hopefully that gives them the courage to do the work that they dream of doing.
So I feel like, you know, I've been homeschooling Max, and I've been wearing my teacher bag. And I'm going to wear my teacher hat right now and remind you all of our assignments.
All
Right, we're supposed to create a question, right?
There you go. There you go.
Okay.
I'll let whomever take that away.
Well, I don't necessarily have a question, but I do have something that I have struggled with as an artist, and this goes back to this goes back to being able to see what is actually happening, see what's going on, and the scenario is, um, I can get funding, a good amount of funding, you know, to take care of the bills, take care of the family, you know, do the art, and it's in a community that, you know, I grew up in, you know, which was, when I was growing up, predominantly Black, but now, you know, that wave has come through. Um, the struggle is how, when it comes to revitalizing a community, how the artist is used. And sometimes I feel if the artist just took a stance or unionized or something like that, that we would be able to catch exactly how we're about to be used in order to bring in the Whole Foods and the Trader Joe's and the tattoo parlors, and we've all seen it. You know, so it's a bittersweet check, you know, that gets received, and yeah, I just, what is the role of what is the responsibility of the artist? I don't know, creating some kind of community that no longer allows us to accept those checks. But you know what I'm saying? But you know, something, sort of community that we don't have to like accept something that we know is going to beautify our own neighborhood to the point where we can no longer afford it. You know what I'm saying? That's a very interesting struggle that I've had as an artist, or just a kind of awareness. And it's dealing with space, it's dealing with land, and it's dealing with the system. So anyway, how do y'all deal with that sort of double consciousness, that sort of, you know, that bringing attention to a certain space is playing a kind of game that is not aligned with the true liberation, but just with getting by for the next day, from day to day, you know?
I'll respond. I don't have answers, but I am curious. I think that I don't know if this exists, but I think as a profession or as a, I don't know, industry, I don't know what we want to call art, but I think there should be some expectations or norms or best practices as it relates to creating public art, as it relates to creating art in spaces that are part of an overarching economic revitalization or whatever system. Like, you know, and part of that could be asking of the institutions and local governments, what are your redevelopment plans? What are your plans for inclusion? What are your plans to prevent whatever? Like that's part of the conversation, that it's not simply transactional and what the visuals are, but what is your city's arts programming budget? And really getting underneath the hood and not just making it about the art itself and where the art's going to be placed, but tasking the entity or government that's engaging your services with answering some of those questions. And that, of course, requires artists to be informed and understand, what kind of questions are important to draw out that kind of information. But I also understand at the end of the day, artists have to get paid, and they're the most undervalued profession. And so it can be hard to choose between principle and, the future of this community that the development is benefiting from. So that's a reality too. But I also like what you say about a union, because a lot of these public art commissions go to white men who have a lot of experience doing public art, and that's the basis of them getting to do it. And then they'll add on some contractors, some of color, to say we worked with local artisans and shit. So it's complex. What do you think, Amina?
Amina, did you hear? Uh, she asked your thoughts. I'm sorry.
Oh, I don't know. I'm thinking and not talking. But okay, so I'm just wondering if instead of, providing those prompts and, because in that is sort of an education, is the other flip side of that just saying, okay, I'm not going to participate. Because I'm like, I like this black box and this black space where we don't have to, engage. But I'm just wondering if is that a realistic, because Jess, I feel like you've made that a realistic thing. And I think now I sort of left a museum context, I left a nonprofit context so that I'm not forced to, work with a developer to put in street art, that's graffiti abatement. Like, I don't have to do those, those really stupid things. But again, I know that that's not everybody's reality and it's not fair. But I just wonder, and, maybe somebody can speak to this, creating safe havens for Black artists, Black people and Black communities, how can we do more of that?
Yes. Yes. Oh my goodness. Deep ass question right there.
I know.
I mean, you're dealing with, you said safety, right? Like security, safe spaces, right? Mm. Mm. How do you? I mean, there's certain families, even within the family unit, where certain children are not feeling safe. There's so many experiences of insecurity, of uh, like, where do we can definitely put intention into a certain space, as far as be if it's a park or be if it's a certain type of center, and say that this space offers rest to whomever we're targeting, Black women, mothers, uh, men, trans community, Black trans community. We can be very specific with the intentionality that we infuse into a space. But yeah, it's still hitting on that, our relationship with security and safety. What makes us feel comfortable? What makes us feel safe? What are the threats? and really starting to have that conversation about the things that makes us feel insecure. Because personally, I'm bringing a whole bunch of my insecurities to, they live in me, and then sometimes that comes out in the spaces that I occupy. So, but yeah, I'm still willing to like collaborate and attempt to create safe spaces, healing spaces for people to listen in, and all that stuff. Blah, 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 blah. Somebody take the mic. Take the mic off this man. I'm passing it over. And I don't have a question, but I would
Well, you know
love.
what? I will say that. So when I said safe spaces, I didn't even mean safety in the way that we are taught safety in like the community arts, public arts space, where it's like, we want, create light so that people can see. I'm just thinking like, I want to be able to create and exist without having to, rectify other people's wrongs and create, without, with just a little bit more freedom. And it's an audience of my peers, it's work that is healing for us.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily eye candy for other people.
Yes.
Mavis, tell us about the time. Tell us about the time you turned down the bag. Let's hear it. I feel like we've all had those experiences, right? Like the bag's on the table, Mavis, it's looking real appetizing, but you know that the bag is tied to compromising your integrity.
Right.
Or not for the betterment of your community. Like, this is the question, right? Like, how do we move forward? How do we operate when we don't have the bag, but the bag's in front of us and it's looking like that carrot when you're Bugs Bunny? Like, what's the move, Mavis?
Well, I will say that's why part of why I'm engaged in the arts is because I think as a community, the Black community needs to prioritize being stewards and custodians of our work so that artists can have that kind of freedom and agency to create for who they want to create. Again, going back to Ricardo's point about land and this system that we're in, this capitalist system we are in, art, the money from art is made in a capitalist market. But what would it look like if the Black community adopted as a norm and, reminded ourselves of it on a regular basis of the imperative role that art plays in our community and that we supported it in that way, give reverence to art and artists and pay into that so that Black artists can do for themselves and for our community. I mean, I think that's why it's important to me, or that's what's important to me in my involvement in the arts, is getting more Black people to collect art and view themselves as custodians and having in a sense, a fiduciary duty to art and artists. And so the way I go about that is being transparent about my own collecting. I have a $3,500, well, it's worth more now, but when I bought it, I paid $3,500 for some tissue paper up there in the corner. But it was important to me because it was, I was connected to the piece itself and the artist. And I knew that I could spend that money on a couple of trips, or I could be part of her journey. And so, educating people about my own experience with collecting, but also creating opportunities for people to collect by having, programming and so forth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Amina, you want to say something real deep too.
Oh no, I'm just dying to know more about your collection.
It's here in a box. I just moved.
Oh,
Congratulations.
Thank you.
very nice.
Most of my work is I would say 90% of my work is, or maybe 95% of my work is by Black artists and mostly Black women. And that the Black women part wasn't intentional. I think it was just natural.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I'm going to insert myself here, which folks like Naomi, who have participated in all of them, Naomi's going to be like, what? Okay, so it's going to be a little different because I am going to insert myself in here right now. Mavis, when I think about collecting, I love that you're referring to it as custodialship, because I have been stepping into my life as collector, like I've been wearing that title more. And I think that and it's because somebody called me, Alison Glenn called me, and she's like, I want to talk to you about your philosophy of collecting. And I was like, I don't feel like I'm the one, but I'll tell you what I think. And what I think, and that I'm developing language for, is that it's not about the object, it's about the artist. It's about that journey. And it's an investment in the individual, not the tangible object that exists on the wall or on the pedestal, right? And I think about like this, Ricardo started our talk saying, you know, it's not about owning the land, it's about the land owning them. And I wonder if this is how we start to think about art collecting, right? Like, I wonder if there's some parallels between like the way that we're thinking about stewardship and investment and support. Like, do you see is there a connection here? You feeling this, Mavis?
Oh, absolutely. I'll share. There's this, I live in Durham, North Carolina, and there's this Black and Brown collective that formed a cooperative in which they own about 42 acres of land. So all Black and Brown folks, they got a farm, all this stuff. And I went there, I visited one time, and we did this exercise where we laid on the forest floor and just looked up. Yeah. And I saw these purple stripes on trees. So it was every other tree or every few trees, there was this purple stripe. And I know a lot of artists live in this collective. And so I thought it was art. Like, I thought that they had done some kind of abstract art by putting these purple bands around various trees. So anyway, I was just laying there in the moment, appreciating the combination of art and nature. It turns out that the purple bands were actually marking a conservation easement. But if we accept that it was also art, how powerful was that for me to be in such solitude with nature and art? And I really became curious about the role of art in the natural environment. And of course, the natural environment itself is art. But, you know, what would it look like and feel like for us to go out into the woods to experience art? How would that impact our relationship with art and with nature? How would that impact our health? You know, there are studies that show the impacts, the positive impacts or health impacts of art and of nature. What if that was all in one place and that became something that we did and cherish as part of our health? That's what came to mind when you were speaking, Jessica.
Yes. All right. Are you all familiar with a artist by the name, visual artist by the name of Christo? Or I think it's just that's all I know. Christo, like
Yeah.
takes fabrics and materials of that nature. I don't know if Christo's still in this world doing the thing, but sometimes I look at an artist's work such as that. It's like, okay, we're going to take 4 miles of fabric and cover an entire mountain in order to like, you know, just so its form can be revealed, the form of the mountain, and the entitlement that comes with, you know, being able to go to these spaces and do work on such a grand scale like that. I'm gonna take this whole forest. You know, there is an art war going on, and there are certain people that have this consciousness that they can do whatever the hell they want to do, and they do it, and it is funded, and it becomes, so this game isn't going anywhere. So I encourage all Black artists to go bigger. Like, let's do some Frank Lloyd Wright stuff. Let's build these beautiful sanctuaries in the forest. Let's create retreat spaces for Black people to have access to that mountain range again, because let's if I don't know. It's like, let's create something beautiful. Let's do it. Let's do not exactly the way that they have done it. If there is this them and us sort of thing that, I'm not trying to perpetuate the hierarchy of oppression, but there is a kind of consciousness that people carry into the art world that just does whatever. And I think maybe this is also thinking about public and private. What's we need a better those are spaces. That's language that we're applying to a space. I don't know. Somebody help me out here.
So I do have some reactions to that. I think just inherently, culturally, a lot of our artistic traditions are land-based and nature-based. I think some of my earliest, encounters with public art is us reclaiming space, creating graffiti, or even just more, older than that, making bottle trees, creating scenes in our front yard, in our landscape, decorating our porch, or just doing whatever. So that is something that is just like a legacy and a tendency that we have. I think the issue is that I kind of see from a policy standpoint that Black artists get sort of ghettoized or pigeonholed into certain categories. So even though a lot of us, I know one artist who I'm just such a huge fan of, she does temporary based work, sort of like Andy Goldworthy or whatever. Like, she'll go and she'll create these, these works that will naturally degrade over time, to focus us on our landscapes. But, getting a nonprofit to fund her to do that or to commission her, I kind of feel like people see Black women, Black men as artists, and they want us to do a specific thing. And we just don't get those opportunities within that construct to do what Christo, to wrap a building.
Right.
So, and I guess my question that I just prompted and I keep going back to is how do we do that, and can we do that within these systems? Like, do we just have to create our own organizations and our own funding structures to get to that point? Does writing policy pointing out that doesn't happen, does that make it happen? Does that change hearts and change minds, or do we just have to say, okay, whatever, we're just gonna do it ourselves?
Well, and the interesting thing, or not interesting thing, but the complexity that goes with that is that, our art is also viewed as a privilege, and there are critical issues that are at the forefront that in the Black community that I think makes it difficult to prioritize that, food security, criminal justice, et cetera. So how do we educate people in the community to appreciate the role art plays in addressing those issues? Whether it's environmental justice, whether it's criminal justice, whatever. I think that's part of the challenge for us as a community. And then, I'm curious about, what Jessica said earlier, that quote around whatever the quote was that spoke to educating. Because I'm tired of educating folks. Well, I want to educate my people, but.
Right.
Excellent.
Well, okay, I've gotten a lot of awesome data from our discussion today. Let's pull some things out. Starting with reframing ownership. Ricardo, I really appreciate that. It's like, we don't own shit. And even when we do own things, it's so easily taken, that it's never really ownership. And that instead, the priority should be about a connection to the land, right? Like a return, how did you say it? A spiritual shift to reconnect us. I really appreciated that. Also this fervor around going bigger and going like better, like do it all, like that feels really empowering. And I feel like we need to hear that all the time. You know, like there's a, what is it, imposter syndrome? Like, is it a lack of, is a historical lack of that makes us feel like we don't deserve or we're not warranted or like, for whatever reason, like that needs to be abandoned. Right. Like, actually, Alicia told me earlier this week that I need to move through the world as a mediocre white man. And I really appreciated hearing that. You know, there's this urgency that you've expressed in creating something beautiful and bigger. And I really appreciate that, Ricardo. You also talked about this idea of how artists can be used in revitalizing communities, which I think is a pin. Let's put a pin in that. That makes me think of Theaster, right? Like, is it about who's gentrifying that makes it good or bad? I don't know. We can talk about this forever. Also, this idea of a union, right? Like creating some kind of community where we don't have to accept checks anymore. I was just in Miami and this guy was walking through the mall and he had a sweatshirt on that looked like the, you know, the antisocial type where it's kind of wavy, antisocial club, but it said anti-taking checks club. And I was like, I need to take a picture of that. I was chasing this man down in the mall because I feel so strongly about leaving the bag on the table. Yeah. If it doesn't feel right, you know, like why do we feel like we need to compromise our integrity? Why do we feel like we have to reconsider who we are or what we stand for based upon currency? That doesn't make sense.
Because they're going to give it to somebody else.
Naomi, y'all got me thinking about how some communities of people establish families or houses of artists that are taken care of so that they can do the spiritual work of creating for themselves and the healing of their people. Or am I describing communism? Mavis, you checked me in that it's not always a responsibility, but an opportunity. And I appreciate that shift in perspective. There is this, man, what did you say? Reminding ourselves the importance of our own art in our communities, the value of our art in our communities, which also led me into thinking about like stepping into our titles, right? And like really claiming who we are. I really appreciated that. Also the role of art in the natural environment. I was like, ding, that was relevant. And Amina, you referenced something that Lakeisha Wolf said in like our second session about being, before you can create safe spaces, you have to be courageous. And you said today that before you have the skill set, you have to have the courage. It's so interesting in so many of these talks, it's we're saying the same thing from clearly so many different disciplines and so many different experiences and walks of life, but the language is the same. Mm-hmm. And like what is becoming our apparent is like across different fields and different industries, our needs remain the same. That's really illuminating for me. Space to create without rectifying others' wrongs, but instead being healing for us. Amina, that was chef's kiss.
Dreams. That is my dream. You know.
Yeah. That's awesome. This is so rewarding and so generative. Generous is what I meant to say. So that's the wine. So generous of each of you to spend your Friday afternoon with all of us conceiving what Blackness can be. And what we can build.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This is therapy. I need to send somebody, you know, a check. Help me. Thank you.
Okay, we'll do round robin. We'll start with Amina, Mavis, and then Ricardo. Can you say how people find you? Are you social? How do people find you?
So I am on Instagram at Black monuments. And I've been loafing, but my goal is to post projects by Black artists and architects in the built environment, and just show people the work that we do and highlight those artists who don't get highlighted enough. So that is where you will find me on Instagram.
I got you.
On Instagram, you will find me at, I'm going to put it in the chat because it doesn't make sense, but Pedaling with Mavis, and then Popbox Gallery, which is a gallery that I'll be launching next month in Durham.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Very excited.
Awesome. On Instagram, I think that's all I really frequent, but you'll find me as Lavender Freddy, and just as my other name, and I'll put it in the chat, just Ricardo Iamuri. I would love for you all to, whenever you get a chance, kind of look for, I'll put this in the chat as well, but it's a sound piece that I created this year called Black Body White Noise. And yeah, I would love for that to be in your lives, yeah, it's a long meditation of incredible perspectives and voices and stuff like that. But yes, I am following both of you now, and this has been incredible and very, very empowering.
I'm really grateful for your time, all of you. And what did I say in the beginning, Ricardo? Like, folks, it leads to future collaborations, these talks, like there's engagement that builds on this platform. And so I hope that y'all keep talking to each other. I hope that maybe, let's see, Ricardo can work with Mavis to buy land, that then they work with Amina to create a public art that will be situated on land. Who knows? Next Friday, next Friday is the 14th of January, and at 5, I'll be joined with Danny Dunson of the DuSable Museum of African American History, and Emma Osor, who is a part of Black Space Org, as well as Celeste Smith, who is the senior program officer at the Pittsburgh Foundation. And we'll be talking about growth and development. So I hope you guys register for that. Again, I just want to give all of my love and big giant hugs to Amina, Ricardo, and Mavis.
Before we go, Mavis, is there any way that you can help me acquire land, because I want to create a huge crater? This is like Afrofuturism, but this crater, I want to create the perfect echo.
Ooh.
So I need some space to create a beautiful Black crater where you can hear your own voice back to you crystal clear.
Oh, wow. I love that. Yeah.
We'll talk.
Okay.
It's been so nice to speak with you all. Jess, thank you so much for creating this really beautiful space for us today. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Okay. You guys don't hang up. We're going to stay on, but we're going to do our big goodbye. Oh, I did want to play a song, but I really forgot it. So I'll play it in this moment as everybody's signing off. Okay.
Yeah.
Start it over. Let me see.
Oh, mercy, mercy me. All things ain't what they used to be now. Where did all the blue skies go? Poison is the wind that blows from the north, south, and east. Oh, mercy, mercy me. All things ain't what they used to be now. Oil wasted on the oceans and upon high seas, fish full of mercury. Oh, mercy, mercy me. All things ain't what they used to be. No, radiation underground in the sky, animals and birds who live nearby. Have mercy, mercy, mercy. All things and what they used to be. What about this overcrowded house?